Welcome to another podcast of the Riffle series. The Riffle, a podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves.
It's great to be here.
So picture this. You're sitting at your kitchen table, right? You're just trying to wire a down payment for a new house. You hit send on your banking app, and your screen immediately flashes that tiny loading circle.
We all know that circle.
Right. And in those 3 seconds, your money is zipping through this massive labyrinth of institutional checks, balances, global ledgers. Now imagine a shadow network doing the exact same thing.
But obviously not for a house.
Exactly. Instead of buying a house, they're moving millions in illicit funds. And they're bouncing it across like 6 different countries before you can even blink.
Yeah, and historically, tracking that kind of financial crime meant an auditor sitting in a dusty room, flipping through ledgers months after the fact.
It was literally like reading yesterday's newspaper to solve a robbery that happened last spring.
Right. That historical approach was basically the Achilles heel of global finance.
Yeah.
Regulators were always just conducting autopsies.
Looking at the damage long after the money had vanished.
Vanished into offshore accounts or shell companies. Yeah.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is so critical. We are looking at a system designed to catch those funds not weeks later, not days later, but right this very second.
It's a total game changer.
We're going through Regulation No. 1 of 2026, issued by the UAE's Financial Intelligence Unit, the FIU. And this is effectively a real-time Amber Alert for dirty money.
It is. And it forces everyone in the financial sector to act with just absolute lightning speed. It completely rewrites the rules of engagement.
Because it's not just aimed at traditional banks, right?
No, not at all. This legislation casts a massive net over designated non-financial businesses and professions.
The DNFBPs.
Exactly. As well as virtual asset service providers, or VASPs.
So let's translate that for a second. We aren't just talking about, a teller at a local bank branch.
We're talking about high-end real estate agents in Dubai.
Right. Luxury jewelers, corporate lawyers setting up shell companies, and massive crypto exchanges.
Anyone handling vast sums of wealth outside the traditional banking window is suddenly, on the front lines.
And today's mission is to uncover these high-stakes ticking clock systems the UAE is using to stop illicit funds right in their tracks. Because if millions can vanish with a single tap on a smartphone,
the response has to be just as fast.
Yeah. But to freeze that suspicious money, the authorities first need to know that it's actively trying to flee.
Right. The window of opportunity isn't days. It's often measured in minutes.
Which moves us from the broad idea of financial surveillance to the really specific tactical trigger this regulation introduces, the Postponement Suspicious Transaction Report.
The PSTR. This is the tip of the spear here, and we really need to distinguish it from the normal suspicious transaction report, the STR, that compliance officers file all the time.
Right. An STR is basically a standard incident report. It says, hey, this account looks a bit weird. Someone should look into it eventually.
Exactly. But the new PSTR is entirely different. It's pulling the emergency brake on a moving train.
So a reporting entity, say a cryptocurrency exchange, submits this PSTR through a secure system called GoAML.
Yes.
But they can't just spam the system every time someone buys a slightly unusual amount of Bitcoin. The regulation dictates this is strictly for situations with an urgent character.
And that urgency is defined by the risk of imminent transfer, withdrawal, or dissipation of funds.
Dissipation.
Yeah, dissipation is the ultimate nightmare scenario for law enforcement. It basically means the target realizes they're being watched.
And they panic.
They panic, and they immediately start breaking the money into microscopic pieces. They scatter it across different jurisdictions, tumble it through crypto mixers, or convert it into untraceable assets.
Wow. And once dissipation starts, the money is just gone.
Completely gone.
Okay, let's unpack this. The regulation lays out some specific triggers for when an institution should consider filing this urgent PSTR. One of them is if the transaction involves at least 500,000 dirhams.
Right, the threshold.
Now, maybe it's just me, but isn't that a massive loophole? Like, if you're a criminal syndicate, wouldn't you just program your algorithms to move dirty money in chunks of 499,000 dirhams?
Just to stay permanently under the radar.
Yeah. I mean, we see that kind of structuring all the time.
What's fascinating here is that the drafters of the legislation anticipated exactly that kind of structuring behavior.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, yeah. The 500,000 dirham threshold is explicitly defined as indicative. It's a guideline to help prioritize resources, not a hard floor.
Interesting.
In fact, the rule specifically states that this threshold completely vanishes if the transaction involves terrorism financing, third-party money laundering, or high-threat predicate offenses.
And a predicate offense is the underlying crime, right? Like the original sin that generated the dirty money in the first place.
That's it. Whether it's illegal arms dealing, human trafficking, or a massive corporate embezzlement scheme.
So the amount doesn't matter then?
It absolutely does not matter if the transaction is 500 dirhams or 5 million dirhams. The institution hits the PSTR emergency brake regardless.
And the regulation lists other critical triggers too, like, are the funds linked to a politically exposed person?
Right, someone with deep government ties who might be moving bribe money.
Or is there a sudden risk the owner of the funds is about to hop on a private jet and leave the country?
Flight risk is a huge trigger.
Yeah.
If those red flags pop up, the institution files the report, and when they hit that brake, the rules mandate a strict 3-day hold.
So the bank basically has to freeze the transaction for 3 business days, just waiting for the FIU to investigate.
And that 3-day hold creates an incredibly tense tightrope for the institution because they have to pause the money without tipping off the customer.
The dreaded tipping off.
Yeah.
Because imagine you're that criminal. You try to wire your money out and suddenly your transaction fails for no apparent reason. You call the bank and the teller stammers and makes up an excuse.
You're going to panic?
Right. You'll realize the authorities are onto you and you'll immediately start destroying hard drives or fleeing the jurisdiction.
Which is why the legislation includes a crucial exception. If stopping the transaction is objectively impossible due to the speed of the platform, or if pausing it would alert the suspect,
they can let it go.
The institution is actually allowed to let the transaction go through. But if they do that, they have a brutally short window of just 2 hours to file the PSTR.
2 hours.
Just 2 hours to explain exactly why they let potentially criminal funds slip through their fingers.
That is intense. 2 hours to document and justify letting dirty money walk out the door, just to protect the broader, ongoing investigation.
The level of operational agility required from these private companies is staggering.
I can imagine. So the institution has successfully pulled the emergency brake, the PSTR is filed via the GoAML system, and the suspect doesn't know a thing.
Now the ball is in the FIU's court.
Which leads us to how the state strikes back. Once the FIU analyzes that urgent report, they issue official orders to lock down the money.
Right. The FIU utilizes 2 main enforcement tools here: suspension orders and freezing orders.
And understanding the mechanical difference between those two is pretty vital.
It's vital for anyone operating in the global market. A suspension order is the lighter touch, lasting for up to 10 business days.
And from what I understand, it operates kind of like a sniper rifle. It's highly targeted.
Exactly. It focuses on halting one specific transaction or any functionally equivalent transaction the suspect might try to use to circumvent the block.
So it hits pause on a specific financial movement without shutting down the person's entire life.
Right. But a freezing order, that is dropping a heavy net over the entire relationship. It lasts for up to 30 days, and it freezes all funds, all accounts, and every single business tie.
So if you hold 3 bank accounts, a safety deposit box, and a mortgage with that institution, everything is placed on immediate lockdown.
Everything.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the timeline for executing these orders is just mind-blowing. When a bank or a crypto exchange receives one of these orders via the government's IAM system.
The Integrated Inquiry Management System.
Right. When they get that, they must acknowledge receipt within 2 hours. And the legislation explicitly states that this applies outside of business hours and on weekends.
Yeah, imagine the reality of being a compliance officer at a major virtual asset platform. Your crypto exchange operates globally 24/7. There is no closing bell.
Right, so if the FIU's system blasts out a freezing order at 3:00 a.m. on a Sunday morning, your platform has until 5:00 a.m. to acknowledge it and physically halt those virtual assets from moving.
It's relentless. Furthermore, these orders are legally classified as self-executing.
Meaning they completely bypass standard corporate red tape.
Completely. You don't call the bank's general counsel at 4 p.m. to debate the legal merits of the freeze. You don't convene a risk committee.
The state has removed all internal procedural steps.
Yeah. In exceptional high-risk circumstances, the FIU is even authorized to issue a verbal order over the phone.
A verbal order. I mean, imagine managing a high-end brokerage and your emergency pager goes off in the middle of the night. It's the FIU telling you to freeze a $50 million portfolio immediately based purely on a phone call.
Now, the legislation does build in a chain of custody for that scenario.
Okay.
The verbal order must be immediately followed by a formal email, and the FIU is required to provide a written, signed order within 24 hours. But the critical mechanism is that the institution must act on the verbal command the second they hang up the phone.
Wow. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this regulation is effectively stripping away the layers of slow corporate bureaucracy that financial criminals have historically relied on to buy time.
Oh, absolutely. They used to hide behind the fact that banks move slowly.
Now, this rule turns private banks, crypto exchanges, and real estate brokers into direct, real-time extensions of law enforcement.
It deputizes the private sector. The state is essentially saying, you are no longer just a neutral vault storing money. You are our frontline defense, and you operate on our timeline, not corporate banking hours.
But hitting the pause button on a 3 a.m. crypto transfer is just the first step. Keeping a targeted account in a state of suspended animation for up to 30 days introduces an entirely new set of headaches.
Yeah, it gets complicated.
How do you manage perfectly frozen funds without destroying their market value or letting the suspect know they've been caught in the net?
This takes us into the mechanics of what we can call the vault. The rules for maintaining a freezing order are incredibly rigid. The funds must be fully immobilized.
So they're non-transferable and non-withdrawable.
Exactly. Furthermore, they must be protected from standard operational deductions. The bank cannot charge monthly maintenance fees or execute forced liquidations on those specific assets.
So they are legally quarantined in a sterile environment.
Basically, yes. However, there is a complex twist that catches a lot of institutions off guard. The reporting entity must allow credit transactions to process.
Meaning money coming in.
Right. If incoming profits, corporate dividends, or interest payments hit that frozen account, the bank is legally obligated to accept them, credit the account, and promptly inform the FIU about the new money.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there because the logic feels completely backward at first glance. We suspect this money is tied to organized crime, arms dealing, or terrorism. Yet the regulation legally mandates that the bank must transfer these frozen funds into an interest-bearing or profit-generating deposit account at prevailing market rates. We are legally requiring banks to earn competitive market interest for suspected criminals.
This raises an important question, and it's a very common point of confusion when people first read the mandates. You have to remember the fundamental legal principle anchoring all of this.
Which is?
Asset preservation. At the stage of a freezing order, the state has not permanently confiscated the money. A judge hasn't convicted anyone of a crime yet.
Oh, right. They are still legally innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly. And because they're presumed innocent, the state cannot punish the wallet itself. If, after 30 days of investigation, the customer proves their funds are entirely legitimate, the UAE government and the financial institution do not want to be held liable for causing those assets to lose value.
That makes sense. Imagine freezing a massive hedge fund's operating account.
Right. If you just lock that money in a zero-interest vault for a month, they lose out on millions in standard market returns.
And if they're cleared of wrongdoing, they are going to turn around and sue the bank and the state for every penny of that lost profit.
The liability would be astronomical. Earning market interest isn't about rewarding a criminal. It's about preserving the exact economic footprint of the asset so the state doesn't get sued if the tip turns out to be a false alarm.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. You hit the pause button on the movement, but you maintain the value. But what about the person holding that wallet? Does the suspect know their money is frozen during this 30-day period?
Well, that depends entirely on the type of order. During a 10-day suspension order, the institution is sworn to complete silence. The customer cannot know.
But for a 30-day freezing order,
the dynamic changes. The legislation mandates that after the execution of the order, the entity must notify the customer.
They actually have to tell them.
Yes. They're required to tell the suspect that the FIU issued the freeze and then formally request supporting documentation to verify the lawful origin of the funds.
Wow. So it shifts from a silent stakeout to a direct face-to-face confrontation. Like, we have your money, we know you're trying to move it, now prove exactly how you earned it.
Yeah. And if the FIU isn't ready for that confrontation yet, they have one more tool at their disposal, the monitoring order.
What does that do?
Under a monitoring order, the FIU instructs an institution to silently watch an account for up to 30 days without stopping any transactions at all. They just observe the flow of money, record the network of recipients, and report the data back to intelligence officers.
So it's a pure surveillance operation designed to map out the entire criminal syndicate before making an arrest.
Exactly that. It allows law enforcement to see the whole chessboard.
So let's step back and look at the sheer operational weight of everything we've just discussed. To meet incredible 2-hour deadlines, to accept verbal orders in the dead of night,
It's a lot.
to manage perfectly preserved frozen accounts that earn market interest while silently logging IP addresses. Reporting entities can't just slap a new coat of paint on their compliance department.
No, they have to fundamentally rewire how their companies operate. The structural burden placed on the private sector is monumental.
But
The law explicitly requires these entities to establish 204/7 operational coverage. You cannot turn the lights off at 5:00 p.m. on a Friday and expect to stay compliant.
So what does this all mean? It means modern financial institutions, crypto exchanges, and even massive real estate brokerages have to operate like hospitals.
Like hospitals, yeah.
They are required by law to have a 247 emergency room on standby, fully staffed, heavily funded, dedicated exclusively to catching dirty money the second it walks through the door.
The hospital ER is an incredibly accurate way to visualize it. And just like a medical ER, you need an airtight chain of command.
Right.
The regulation mandates a strict segregation of duties between the operational staff, the people processing the day-to-day transactions, and the decision-making personnel. The chief compliance officer, or someone of equal executive seniority, must lead this charge.
Because you can't have a junior data analyst making the final call on a 50 million dirham freezing order at 2 a.m. The stakes are simply too high for both the state and the bank's liability.
Exactly. Furthermore, the oversight of that ER staff is relentless. The legislation dictates that records of all these actions must be preserved for a minimum of 5 years after the business relationship with the customer ends.
Wow, 5 years.
And we aren't just talking about keeping a PDF of the final report in a digital filing cabinet. The records must capture exactly which personnel were involved, at what exact time they received the alert, and every single system action they took.
So they are logging the digital fingerprints of the compliance officers themselves. They track who clicked the freeze button, who made the phone call, and down to the millisecond when it happened.
Because if something goes wrong, if a major cartel moves their money out of the country, because an institution was slow to acknowledge a message on the INS system, the authorities will audit that timeline.
Oh, for sure.
Regular independent audits and dedicated training programs are now legally mandatory to ensure the staff doesn't freeze under the pressure.
And what happens if that independent audit finds that your financial ER was asleep at the wheel? What if nobody answered the 3 a.m. verbal order?
The legislation makes the consequences painfully clear. Gross negligence, systemic failures, or deliberate violations of these reporting windows result in severe penalties under the primary anti-money laundering laws.
So it's not just a warning.
No, it's not just a gentle slap on the wrist or a minor fine for missing a 2-hour window. The financial penalties can be crippling, and the reputational damage to the institution is irreversible.
It is an incredible high-stress journey when you lay it all out. Think about the entire life cycle we've just tracked today.
It's wild.
We go from a compliance officer spotting a subtle red flag, maybe an unexplainable cross-border crypto transfer, to pulling the emergency brake with a PSTR. Then the institution scrambles to execute a verbal FIU order within 2 hours.
Skipping all corporate legal review.
Right. And finally, they manage a high-interest frozen vault under the cover of night, all while keeping a perfectly audited digital trail of every click.
It's a phenomenal high-wire act. But as financial crime accelerates, as criminal syndicates increasingly utilize decentralized virtual assets, algorithmic tumblers, and automated trading bots to move money globally in a matter of seconds, regulations like this UAE decree are the only viable way a modern state can keep pace.
You have to fight speed with speed.
You really do.
But as you process all of this, it leaves you with a really profound golden. This regulation demands perfect 247 technological vigilance from human compliance officers. They are the ones who have to monitor the GoIML systems, evaluate the risk, field the verbal phone calls in the middle of the night, and execute the freezes within an incredibly tight 2-hour window.
Right now, yes.
But as that required response window inevitably shrinks from 2 hours down to 2 minutes, and as these government reporting systems become deeply integrated with the actual digital plumbing of our financial networks, how long until human judgment is removed from this equation entirely?
Yeah.
How long until that real-time Amber Alert isn't sent to a human compliance officer's pager, but straight into a bank's artificial intelligence? An AI with the absolute legally mandated power to freeze your entire financial life in milliseconds before the money can even move. It's something to think about the next time you tap your phone to send a payment into the ether and you watch that little loading circle spin.